Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, Derek and I swear in 2026, PlayStation 5 Emulation is trying to speedrun its own development, because between SharpEmu as well as KyTy PS5, we have so many new updates coming basically every single day. So it's kind of like every 7 to 10 days I can run an update on PlayStation 5 Emulation, showing you guys new working games, new improvements, getting further into some of the best games on PlayStation 5 ever made, and trust me, that list isn't exactly huge these days. And just kind of talk about the fact that I feel like by Christmas, we're going to have a full-fledged PlayStation 5 emulator that'll definitely at least play some games. And honestly, that is a fun world to live in because Sony's basically abandoning gamers with not producing any discs in the future, and PlayStation 5 honestly becomes a little bit of a doorstop in my house because outside of Astro Bot and a few other titles, kind of struggle to find things to play. Now, Karante here uploaded this over to the PlayStation 5 Emulation Discord. I'm crediting everyone for their uploads and leaving a link in the description below. So go ahead and take a look at the top left-hand corner. You will see that right now in Vulkan, this is running around 30 frames per second. In just a moment, I'm going to switch over to an update that came out the same day that this was uploaded, and you're going to see the night and day difference in the actual frame rate for the running of the emulator. And honestly, I can't believe this thing keeps updating so quickly with so many improvements, because right now you have 30 frames per second, which is about half the speed, obviously targeting 60 frames per second that this should be running, and you can clearly tell it is slowing itself down when it does that. So just get an idea of the cadence of what you just saw. Pay attention to these clouds here, and in about 3 seconds we're going to be switching over to this version, and you'll see we've jumped up to 50 to 51 frames per second. Still not 60 frames per second, but that was basically within 12 hours of the first upload that the overall emulation improved to the point in time where you almost had full speed. Now, of course, if you take a look at the uploader specs at the top left-hand corner of the screen, they definitely have more than enough CPU and GPU available to absolutely kind of brute force speed on this one. But like any emulator, once it starts running games, it definitely needs a lot of spec, but when it actually gets improved over time, that spec requirement starts to come down a little bit. And I feel like getting close to PlayStation 5 emulation, you'll probably need a little bit better, but not too much of a spec bump if you can emulate PlayStation 4 games at full speed. But again, that is just me presuming based upon the technology underlying the hood, so we'll have to wait and see how that actually goes when we get into some of the more demanding games and actually able to play them. Let's pop over to a completely different game and a lot older one that runs on PlayStation 5. This is from VERY Emulation, and I have left a link to their YouTube page down below, so go ahead and give them a like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying VGE set, because I always think the more viewers and the more subscriptions smaller channels get, the better off we all are. Now, obviously Tomba 2, not a PlayStation 5 game, but it is a remake, and it does run on PlayStation 5, which means that the emulation needs to be buttoned up enough to actually be able to get into this game and make it playable. So even if it doesn't look visually like a PlayStation 5 game, it is running on PlayStation 5 hardware, which means if you're this far into it on an emulator, that means the emulator is definitely progressing a ton. And it's not surprising you're seeing some of these experiences become playable first, just because they're not utilizing all of the hardware of the PlayStation 5, and obviously not all of the different calls and functions of the GPU. I mean, honestly, it's all an APU at this point in time, so saying CPU and GPU, it's both accurate and inaccurate all in the same sentence, but it does go to show that some games you can just sit down and play today. Now, I have absolutely no idea how far you can get in something like Tomba 2. It might freeze about 10 minutes after this area. It's a very fun game, but honestly, the fact that this even works on PlayStation 5 emulation means we do have playable games at this point in time. Now moving over to Astrobot, this is from Fran Game TV, and they uploaded it to the PlayStation 5 Discord. This is, in my opinion, and I feel like most people will agree, the absolute best game on PlayStation 5, and it is the #1 reason to actually own a console, and it's probably the last game I played on the console as well. This is running under SharpEmu, and you'll see here it does get into the menu, and you can start to see a little bit of graphics draw. It's not going to go very far whatsoever, but considering the last time I took a look at this, it would just black screen completely. It is improving, and I'm definitely sure you're going to be seeing in-game footage from this probably maybe around the time that there's turkeys on the Thanksgiving table, maybe even earlier. Let's pop back over to Tomba 2 and give you a soundtrack sample because it is running audio. So go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back with a lot more PlayStation 5.
Are you all right? I'm fine, but the crab, the precious golden crab is...
Hurry! We've got to put out the fire!
Right.
So that definitely sounds like Tomba, and the most hilarious thing is that is Tomba being emulated on PlayStation 5, and on PlayStation 5 it's emulating a PlayStation 1. So we're getting to Inception levels of actually just kind of having emulation running on emulation, and the fact that that works whatsoever is again impressive. And trust me, I totally know this is not the type of thing that you're going to sit down and spend a ton of time trying to play. I really don't recommend anyone download a PlayStation 5 emulator right now and start trying to play games, because it is in development, it's very experimental, and watching other people talk about it is probably the best way to actually experience anything like this. Because you'll see here again, things will run, things will get into the menu, some things may even get into the game, but that's about as far as you're ever going to get. Where in 6 months to a year from now, you might be sitting down and playing something like the Demon's Souls remake at 60 frames per second, even higher, on PlayStation 5 emulation. Is that my expectation? I'm kind of waiting to see exactly what does happen, but the fact that this is moving so quickly, it doesn't put it outside the realm of possibility that that could be exactly the future we're living in. And I always say, video game emulation is video game preservation, especially with Sony now taking away PlayStation 5 discs in the future, and clearly PlayStation 6 being completely digital. At some point in time when they shut the servers down, you're not going to be able to put that disc into something and be able to play it because it's not going to exist whatsoever. So more so than now, getting these emulators buttoned up and actually working is going to be integral for the future of these games actually surviving, which sounds absolutely insane in 2026 that we could lose games in the future. It seems way more common back in the 80s to early 90s, where some rare games never got dumped or sitting in collectors' hands. But that's exactly the future that we're pointing towards, and it really is a sad future. So the fact that people are working on this to not only allow us to play our games into the future, but to preserve these consoles' libraries for all time is a 10 out of 10 important thing, and I absolutely love that it's happening. I'm taking a look more at the actual Demon's Souls capture here. You can see a little artifacting in the video, or basically in the actual rendering itself. But again, 53 frames per second, that is only like 7 to 10 frames off from its actual target. And last time I showed this to you, it barely even functioned whatsoever. Visuals weren't really even coming out, and I think it ran at like 2 to 3 frames per second. That is absolutely an exponential increase in not only its ability to look like a game you know, love, and remember from PlayStation 5, but its ability to actually run that game at any sort of frame rate that might actually be useful. Now again, there's not really a lot of logic going on in this scene. Once you would actually get into the game, which you can't quite do yet, of course it's going to hit the emulation a lot harder, and I'm sure you'll get back to those 2 to 3 frames per second until it's improved from there. And that really is kind of the fun thing. It's not often that a new generation of hardware starts getting emulation. Sure, we saw it on Chat PS4 some years ago, but this is really the early days in the advent of having something like PlayStation 5 emulation even being possible conceptually, and it is moving faster than any other emulation development I've ever seen. And as far as how these things are being made, I have absolutely no idea. It could be Johnny 5, could be some really smart humans, could be some really smart humans using Johnny 5. But as we get ready to go into the next soundtrack sample of a game that is running near to full speed, see what happens when the scene transitions and gets to the actual fog effect. You're going to go from running into the low 50s to basically 1 frame per second. But go ahead and listen to the next soundtrack sample, and I'll come back and kind of wrap this all up for you guys.
3, 2, 1,
So if you're wondering what this game is and you've never seen it before, it's Fast and Furious Arcade Edition, and it's basically Cruis'n USA meets Fast and Furious, and it has a release on PlayStation 5 because it originally came from the arcades. It isn't the best game ever, but it is a lot of fun, and it definitely gives you some distractions. Would I sit down on a PlayStation 5 emulator and play it that way? No, I'd probably just play it via Technopaired if you really wanted to play it, or I'd pick a copy up for $30 because it is a fun game. But it clearly shows that you can get to full speed on some certain select titles on PlayStation 5 emulation right now, now, whether you're on SharpEmu or KyTy PS5, and that's only going to improve in the future. And that is a fun future, and a future I want to live in, where we have PlayStation 5 emulation and preserve every single game on the platform, because we know full well Sony is not interested in it. But short of that, we're done. If you've tested the emulator, leave me your thoughts down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.